outside with the dogs," my daughter-in-law sneered, her lips curling into that cruel little smirk she always wore when she thought she had the upper hand. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm enough that the grandkids were running barefoot across the backyard, shrieking with laughter as they tumbled in the grass. I had been sitting on the porch swing, watching them with a smile tugging at my lips, feeling for a fleeting moment like I was part of something whole again. But then she appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expensive sunglasses perched atop her head, her eyes narrowing at me like I didn't belong. "You take up too much room here," she continued, voice sharp enough to slice through the laughter. "Go sit outside with the dogs. That's where you belong." Her words hit me harder than a slap. My chest ached, my throat tightened, but I refused to let her see me break. I had raised a son who chose this woman. I had spent my life building a home, a family, a legacy. And now here I was, ordered to sit outside like some unwanted mutt. I swallowed, my hands curling around the edge of the swing. "This is my home," I said softly. She laughed. Actually laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "Not for long. Once you're gone, everything here will belong to us anyway. Why don't you just make it easy and move out now?" That was the greedy heart of it. She wanted the house, the land, the savings I had spent decades scrimping together after my husband's passing. She thought I was fragile, fading, too old to notice her claws slipping into everything I held dear. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already been to my lawyer. I had already signed, sealed, and notarized a will that changed everything. The house, the land, the savings, none of it would touch her hands. She could bark, she could sneer, she could order me outside with the dogs all she wanted. When the time came, it would be her turn to beg. And if you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happened next is a story of betrayal, humiliation, and a cold revenge served in front of everyone who thought I was weak. I should have walked away right then, but I didn't. I stayed seated on that swing, my hands steady in my lap even as her words burned through me. I wasn't going to let her see me run. "Did you hear me?" she snapped, stepping closer. The sunlight caught on her gold bracelet, the one she had hinted my son surprised her with. I knew better. It had come from the joint account, the same account I had once quietly contributed to when they said they were struggling with bills. My help had turned into entitlement. I lifted my eyes to hers. "I heard you. Then move." Behind her, my son appeared, tall and broad like his father once was, but softer somehow, softer where it counted. His eyes flicked from me to her, and instead of stepping in, instead of protecting me, he shrugged. "Maybe it's better, Mom," he said, his voice tired, annoyed, dismissive. "She's right. You've had this place long enough. We need space for the kids." The betrayal cut deeper than any insult she could have thrown. My own son, the boy I had carried, nursed, sacrificed for, siding with a woman who wanted to erase me. I stood slowly, my knees aching, my body stiff. For a moment, I almost gave in, almost shuffled out into the yard with the dogs, just to stop the fight. But then my gaze fell on the swing chain, rusted but still strong. My husband had built this swing for me with his own hands when our boy was just a toddler. Every link, every creak was a memory. No, this was my home, my life, my legacy. I straightened my back, feeling my bones protest but my spirit stiffen. "This isn't yours," I said calmly. "Not now. Not ever." Her eyes widened, then narrowed into slits. "We'll see about that." She turned on her heel, storming inside, my son trailing behind her with a helpless glance over his shoulder. I stayed on the porch swing until the sun dipped low, the laughter of my grandchildren fading as they were ushered inside. I stayed until the dogs padded over, pressing their warm bodies against my legs as if they knew. She thought she had humiliated me. She thought her words would break me. But all she had done was confirm what I already suspected. She wasn't going to wait for me to die peacefully. She wanted to push me out now, take what was mine before the ink on my life had even dried. And that, I decided, was the biggest mistake she could have made. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the house quiet around me. The dogs lay curled on the floor, their steady breathing a comfort in the silence. I opened the drawer where I kept my papers, pulling out the folder stamped with the lawyer's seal. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the neat lines of text I had already read a dozen times. It was all there, the notarized will, signed, dated, airtight. Everything I owned was accounted for, and not a single thing was left to her. The house, the land, the savings, all of it was going to the grandchildren directly, placed in trust until they were old enough to inherit. My son would have access to manage it, yes, but his wife? She wouldn't be able to touch a dime. Not legally. Not ever. I pressed my hand to the cool paper, my heart steadying for the first time all day. She thought she could mock me, reduce me to nothing more than a nuisance, a guest in my own home. But I had already made sure that when the time came, she would be the one left outside, scratching, begging, and barking for scraps that would never come. The next morning, she didn't speak to me. She swept through the kitchen in her silk robe, poured herself coffee into one of my mugs, and carried it out without so much as a glance. My son kissed the top of her head, murmured something I couldn't hear, and the two of them laughed softly together. I sat at the table, hands folded, waiting for him to look at me. He didn't. It was as though I were already gone. But I wasn't gone. And I wasn't done. Because humiliation, I decided, was a two-way street. And when the time came, I would return every sneer, every mocking word, in front of the very people she thought she could fool. And I would do it with the cold, sharp truth of a notarized will she couldn't tear apart. The days after that porch humiliation stretched long and heavy, filled with the kind of quiet tension that made every sound echo. Dishes clinking, footsteps on the hardwood, even the creak of the porch swing felt like reminders of what I'd endured. My daughter-in-law barely acknowledged me. When she did, it was with clipped words, a dismissive wave of her manicured hand, or a pointed remark delivered just loud enough for me to hear. My son followed her lead, though he softened the edges of his cruelty with weary sighs and downcast eyes. He wouldn't fight for me, he had chosen his side. I watched it all in silence. At the breakfast table, she scrolled through her phone, laughing at messages I wasn't privy to. She'd glance up, catch me watching, and smirk. "What are you staring at?" she asked one morning, sipping from a mug that once belonged to my husband. "The coffee tastes different in that cup," I replied calmly. She rolled her eyes. "It's just a mug, Margaret. You can't take it with you when you go." The sting in her words wasn't subtle anymore. She wasn't hinting, she was declaring. I folded my napkin and set it beside my plate. "Neither can you." Her laugh was sharp, dismissive. But she didn't understand. She thought I was a relic clinging to a past I couldn't hold. She thought her youth and my son's obedience gave her all the power. But power, I knew, was measured differently. It wasn't in who shouted loudest, but in who prepared longest. The children, bless them, still ran to me when they wanted stories or cookies. They curled into my lap without hesitation, their sticky fingers tugging at my cardigan. But even there, her shadow loomed. "Don't give them too much sugar," she snapped one afternoon as I handed the youngest a chocolate chip cookie. "They'll get cavities." "They'll get memories," I replied softly, brushing crumbs from the child's hair. "And one day they'll thank me for it." She scoffed. "They'll thank me when I give them this house." The child in my lap looked up, confused. "Grandma's house." "Yes, Grandma's house," she said sweetly, crouching to their level. "But someday it'll be mine, and then yours." The child frowned. "But it's Grandma's now." The truth, from the mouths of babes. Her smile faltered, then tightened into something forced. She kissed the child's head and straightened. "Run along now." The children scattered, leaving us alone in the kitchen. "You see," she said, her tone hardening. "They already expect it. And they'll have it. So why drag this out? Sign it over and let us take care of things." I held her gaze steadily. "No." Her nostrils flared. "Stubborn old woman." I returned to my knitting, my needles clicking softly, the steady rhythm louder in my ears than her insults. I didn't need to argue. My will had already spoken for me. It wasn't just in the house. Her greed spilled into every gathering, every moment with family. At Sunday dinner, she bragged about renovations she planned. "I'll knock down that wall," she said, gesturing with her wine glass. "Open up the kitchen into the living room. We'll finally make this place modern." My sister-in-law glanced at me, startled. "But this is Margaret's home." The daughter-in-law waved a hand, laughing. "For now. But really, it's already ours. Isn't that right?" She turned to my son, who nodded, though his eyes didn't meet mine. I stayed quiet, sipping water, watching as the table shifted uncomfortably. They didn't know. None of them knew. And I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. Revenge, I believed, was best when it ripened. And I was letting it ripen in full view, while she strutted and bragged, thinking she was untouchable. One afternoon, she caught me polishing the silverware. My husband and I had bought the set together on our 10th anniversary. Each piece carried memory, holidays, birthdays, quiet dinners. "Why are you wasting time with that junk?" she scoffed. "I'll probably just sell it when it's mine." I paused, the cloth in my hand stilling. "Do you think money makes everything shine?" "Of course it does," she said without hesitation. "And soon it'll all be ours." I set the spoon down carefully. "Then maybe you should polish it yourself." She sneered. "Not worth my time." Her arrogance was astounding. She couldn't see the trap I'd already laid. She thought I was helpless, too fragile to fight back. But what she didn't realize was that every mocking word, every declaration she made in front of others, was setting the stage for her own humiliation. Because when the day came, and the lawyer read my will aloud, she would be stripped of everything she thought she owned. And she would have no one to blame but herself. That night, as I sat at my desk, I reread the will again. The lawyer's words were clear, ironclad. My estate would bypass her entirely, going straight to the grandchildren. My son had responsibilities, yes, but none of it would pass through his wife's greedy fingers. I traced the notary's seal with my fingertip, feeling the weight of what was to come. She thought I was playing defense. She didn't realize I was already on the offense. And soon, the whole family would see her exposed for what she truly was. The first crack in her mask came sooner than I expected. At another dinner, she raised her glass high. "To family," she said loudly, her smile bright. "And to the future of this home, our home." The table hesitated, some raising their glasses uncertainly, others glancing at me. I smiled faintly, lifting my water. "To family," I echoed. Her eyes glittered with triumph, but she didn't notice the unease around her. She didn't see the way people shifted in their chairs, the way whispers passed after her bold claim. I saw. And I waited. Because soon, it wouldn't just be whispers. It would be gasps. And when the lawyer's words filled the room, her laughter would curdle into silence. By the third week, her cruelty stopped being subtle. It wasn't barbs slipped into conversation anymore, it was outright commands, delivered in front of anyone who happened to be listening. "Move your things out of the upstairs closet," she told me one morning, her voice brisk as she sipped her coffee. "I need the space for my clothes." I blinked at her from across the kitchen table. My knitting needles paused mid-stitch. "That closet has been mine for 40 years. Her painted lips curved into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Exactly. 40 years is long enough." Before I could answer, my son shuffled in, adjusting his tie. He kissed her cheek absently and reached for his travel mug. She turned to him with a sweet smile. "Darling, tell your mother it's time to move her things out of the way. We need to start reorganizing this house. It's ours to run now." He hesitated. Just for a moment, his eyes flicked to mine. I saw the boy I raised buried in that look, but then it slipped away. He shrugged. "Maybe she's right, Mom," he said quietly. "It would make things easier." I stared at him, my throat tight. My own son, nodding along as though my years of sacrifice meant nothing, as though the walls of this house hadn't been built with my sweat and tears alongside his father's. I lowered my needles, folding my hands. My voice came out steady, though inside I was shaking. "This house is mine. It will remain mine until the day I draw my last breath." Her eyes gleamed with triumph. "We'll see." Later that afternoon, I walked through the empty rooms slowly, letting my fingers trail over the wallpaper, the banisters, the photographs hanging on the walls. My husband's smile looked back at me from a frame on the mantel, his eyes steady, reassuring. "You'd laugh at me if you saw me now," I whispered. "Still fighting the same battles, just with new faces." The dogs padded behind me, their nails clicking softly against the floorboards. They were the only ones in the house who came when I called, the only ones who didn't treat me like a burden. I paused by the closet she demanded I clear. I opened the door and looked at the neatly hung dresses, the boxes stacked carefully on the top shelf. Wedding mementos, baby clothes I'd kept, love letters yellowed with age. Every scrap was part of my life. And she wanted it gone. But the more she pushed, the calmer I felt inside. Because I knew what was coming. I knew that while she strutted and planned, while she mocked and demanded, my will sat quietly in a locked drawer at the lawyer's office, a time bomb she couldn't see, ticking toward the day she'd be exposed. At the next family dinner, she decided to test the waters again. "I've been thinking," she announced loudly, swirling her wine. "Once the paperwork is finalized, we'll redo the backyard. Maybe add a pool. It'll make the property more valuable when we eventually sell." Fawkes paused. My nephew glanced at me, his brow furrowed. My sister-in-law's lips parted, but she said nothing. The entire table turned toward me, waiting. I laid my fork down carefully. "Paperwork?" I asked softly. She smirked. "Oh, you know. Wills, deeds, titles. The things that really matter." The silence that followed was suffocating. My son cleared his throat. "She just means, thinking about the future." "Yes," she said quickly, her eyes fixed on me. "The future without you." There it was. Out loud. The table erupted into awkward chatter as relatives tried to fill the silence, but the words had already landed. I smiled faintly and lifted my glass. "To the future," I said, my voice steady. She raised hers too, confident, smug. She didn't realize she was toasting her own downfall. One evening, I overheard her on the phone. She was in the den, her voice carrying down the hallway. "Once she's gone, it's all ours. The house, the savings, everything. I told you it's just a matter of time." She laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "We'll sell the land first," she continued. "That alone will get us millions. She doesn't even realize what she's sitting on. She's too old to understand its worth." I leaned against the wall, my heart hammering. Millions. That was all I was to her, a dollar sign, a transaction waiting to clear. I stepped away silently, retreating to my room. I closed the door, locked it, and pulled out the copy of my will I had tucked in the drawer. I ran my fingers over the seal, my lips pressing into a thin line. "She thinks she's clever," I whispered. "But she's forgotten who taught my son what hard work looks like. She's forgotten who built this home." I folded the will carefully and slid it back into its folder. Patience, I reminded myself. Patience was my weapon. The cruelest moment came at the children's school recital. The gymnasium was packed, the stage decorated with paper stars. I sat in the front row, my hands folded in my lap, waiting to see my grandchildren sing. She leaned close, her perfume cloying, her voice a hiss. "Do you see all these people? They'll know me as the owner of that big, beautiful house. Not you. You'll be gone, forgotten, and I'll be the one who matters." I didn't turn to her. I kept my eyes on the stage, on the little faces smiling nervously under the lights. But inside, her words hardened me like stone. When the recital ended, the children ran into my arms, wrapping me in their hugs. She watched from a few steps away, her jaw tight, her smile brittle. For all her boasting, she couldn't take that from me. Not yet. And when the truth came out, she'd lose far more than my house. She'd lose her pride. At home that night, I sat at my desk, writing in my notebook. Not lists of chores or memories this time, but lines of resolve. "She will be exposed," I wrote. "In front of family. In front of friends. Her cruelty will echo back to her." I closed the notebook and set it aside, feeling a calmness settle over me. The time was coming. And when it did, she would realize too late that mocking me, dismissing me, and calling me a dog had only chained her to her own humiliation. The breaking point came not with shouting, but with silence. One Saturday morning, I walked into the living room and froze. My daughter-in-law was standing on a chair, arms full of photo frames she had pulled from the wall. My wedding portrait. The baby pictures of my son. Allison's graduation photo. My husband's retirement celebration. All of it, gone from the wall, piled carelessly on the floor. "What are you doing?" My voice shook, though not from weakness. She glanced down at me, her smile cold. "Redecorating. These old things are clutter. We're putting up new photos. Ours. This is our house now, Margaret. Time to make it look like it." My chest constricted. "That's my family's history." "Exactly." She hopped down from the chair, dusting her hands. History. And history belongs in boxes. At that moment, my son came in from the garage, wiping his hands with a rag. He saw the pile of frames and frowned faintly. Maybe leave a few of them up, he said uncertainly. She turned to him, one hand on her hip. We've talked about this. We can't start our life here with her past staring at us from every wall. You agreed. He faltered, then looked at me. His eyes were tired, apologetic, but not strong. Maybe we can keep them in storage, Mom. For safekeeping. The betrayal pressed heavy on my ribs. I looked at the man I had raised, the boy I once kissed goodnight, and saw a stranger who no longer had the backbone to protect me. I bent down slowly, lifting my husband's portrait from the pile. Dust clung to the glass. My hand trembled, not from age, but from rage. This isn't your house, I whispered. And it never will be. Her smile sharpened. We'll see about that. That afternoon, I found my closet emptied. My dresses, my shoes, even the boxes of baby clothes I had saved, all of it shoved into cardboard boxes stacked by the door. I told you we needed the space, she said coolly, sipping iced tea as I discovered the mess. You can move your things into the garage. It'll be easier when the movers come, anyway. The movers. Yes, she said casually. We're talking to a realtor next week. This place will go fast. I felt the air leave my lungs. She wasn't just fantasizing anymore. She was acting. I looked at my son, who stood awkwardly in the corner, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. She's just planning ahead, he muttered finally. Planning ahead. To bury me alive, to erase me before my body had cooled in the ground. I gathered my boxes one by one, moving them into my room. Not the garage. Not storage. My room. The room my husband and I had shared for 40 years. I shut the door and locked it. And for the first time in weeks, I laughed. A bitter low sound that echoed in the empty walls. She thought she was winning. She thought her cruelty had broken me. But cruelty was loud. Revenge was silent. And I was very, very quiet. Over the next week, whispers began circulating among extended family. Cousins called. My sister-in-law stopped by. They all danced around the same subject. So have you thought about your estate? One cousin asked, pretending to sip tea while her eyes scanned the stripped walls. You're not getting any younger, another murmured delicately. I smiled faintly. Funny how everyone suddenly cares about paperwork. It was her. My daughter-in-law. She was spreading rumors, seeding greed in others so she could mask her own. She wanted people ready, circling like vultures, so that when I fell, she wouldn't look like the only one snatching at scraps. But she underestimated me. I made a call to my lawyer. It's time, I said simply. Gather them. All of them. Let her bring her pride. I'll bring the truth. The days leading up to the meeting were unbearable, not because of fear, but because of her smugness. She strutted through the house like a queen awaiting coronation. Better start packing up the guest room, she told the children one morning. Grandma won't be here much longer. We'll make it into a playroom. The youngest frowned. Where will Grandma go? Somewhere smaller, she said breezily. Don't worry, we'll visit her sometimes. I stood in the doorway, clutching the frame of my husband's portrait. My eyes met the child's, wide, confused, clinging to a world that was shifting beneath their small feet. I'm not going anywhere, I said gently. My daughter-in-law turned, her smile sharp as glass. Everyone goes eventually. I stepped past her, setting the portrait firmly on the mantel. But not today. By the time the letter arrived from the lawyer's office, inviting the family to a formal reading, the tension was thick enough to choke on. She waved the envelope in the kitchen, grinning from ear to ear. See? She crowed, showing it to my son. It's starting. Finally. We'll have it all written down. No more guessing. He nodded weakly, trying to smile, though I caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. She missed it. She missed everything that didn't fit her fantasy. I sat quietly at the table, sipping tea, letting her bask in the glow of her imagined victory. Because I knew, when the day came, when the lawyer opened that folder and read my words aloud, her laughter would collapse into silence. She would bark. She would beg. And she would leave with nothing but humiliation. The night before the meeting, she cornered me in the hallway. The house was quiet, the children asleep, my son snoring softly in their room. She leaned close, her perfume thick and cloying, her smile venomous. "You could make this easier, you know. Sign it all over now. Save yourself the embarrassment." I stared at her, my silver hair falling loose from its bun, my hands clasped tightly in front of me. "You think embarrassment is my enemy," I said softly. "But embarrassment is yours. And soon, everyone will see it." Her smile faltered for the first time. Just a flicker. But it was enough to warm me as I turned and walked to my room, closing the door firmly behind me. On the morning of the meeting, the house was buzzing. She dressed the children in their best clothes, as though preparing them for a celebration. She herself wore a tailored dress and heels, her hair styled, her jewelry gleaming. "This is history in the making," she told them proudly. "Today, we step into our future." I watched her from the porch swing, my faded cardigan wrapped around my shoulders, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I looked like the frail old woman she thought I was. But inside, I was steel. The lawyer's office would be crowded. The family would gather. The whispers of inheritance would bring them all, eager and expectant. And in front of every last one of them, her downfall would unfold. When we climbed into the car, she didn't even let me sit up front. "Back seat, Margaret," she said breezily. "Elders first, but only in nursing homes." I slid into the back, silent, watching her reflection in the rear-view mirror. She hummed as she drove, smug, her hand resting on my son's knee. She thought she had won. But the truth was waiting, printed, signed and sealed. And soon, the whole family would hear it. The air inside the lawyer's office was thick with expectation. Leather chairs lined the walls, their polished surfaces squeaking faintly as relatives shifted, whispering to one another. The blinds were drawn, slicing sunlight into narrow beams that cut across the long mahogany table at the center of the room. My daughter-in-law strutted in first, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. She wore a fitted navy dress, pearls at her throat, her lips painted a glossy red. She looked like a woman stepping into a crown, already basking in power she hadn't yet earned. My son followed subdued, adjusting his tie as though he wasn't sure why his stomach twisted. I entered last, leaning on my cane though I didn't need it. A small trick, one final layer to the mask I'd worn for weeks, the frail old woman they believed they could push aside. I sat at the far end of the table, hands folded, cardigan buttoned neatly. The room quieted when Mr. Clarkson, my lawyer, cleared his throat. He was a kind man in his 60s with thinning hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He opened a thick folder and adjusted his glasses. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady. "We are here today to review the will and estate plans of Margaret Holloway." My daughter-in-law smiled broadly, reaching for my son's hand. He squeezed hers nervously, his gaze flicking to me before dropping. I didn't move. "As per Mrs. Holloway's wishes," Clarkson continued, "this document was drafted, signed, and notarized 6 months ago, with all proper witnesses present." She leaned forward eagerly. Yes, let's get to the good part." Clarkson's lips twitched, though not in amusement. He turned a page. "The primary residence, including the home, land, and all attached property," he paused for effect, letting the silence stretch, "is to be placed in a trust for the benefit of the grandchildren, effective immediately upon Mrs. Holloway's passing. Oversight shall be granted to Mr. Holloway, her son, but under strict limitation. The spouse of Mr. Holloway shall have no claim, access, or authority over said assets." The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Ripples of shock spread across the room. My daughter-in-law's smile faltered, her painted lips parting. "What?" she hissed. Clarkson didn't look up. He continued reading, each sentence carving deeper into her arrogance. "All savings accounts, investments, and personal heirlooms of significant value are likewise designated directly to the grandchildren. Household items of sentimental worth, photographs, furniture, jewelry, are to remain in Mrs. Holloway's line of blood descent. Again, no claim may be made by any spouse outside that bloodline." She shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. "This is ridiculous. That can't be right." Clarkson lifted his eyes calmly. "It is legally binding, Mrs. Holloway. Your name does not appear anywhere in this document." Her face turned scarlet. You mean to tell me that after all these years, all the work I've put into this family, I get nothing?
You put work into this family? I said softly from my seat. My voice was calm, even, but it carried. Heads turned. What you put into this family were insults, greed, and cruelty. You told me to sit outside with the dogs. You said this house was yours. You forgot who built it. And now, you see the truth. A murmur rippled through the room. My cousins, my nieces, even my son's friends shifted uncomfortably. Her cruelty, once hidden behind charm, was suddenly laid bare under the harsh light of legal truth. She turned on my son, grabbing his arm. Say something. Do something. This is your inheritance too. He swallowed hard, his face pale. It's the kids. It's for the kids.
The words slipped out before he could stop them, but once spoken, he couldn't take them back. Her eyes widened, betrayal flashing across her features. You spineless fool, she spat. Gasps echoed around the table. Clarkson cleared his throat again, refusing to let the spectacle derail his duty.
If I may continue.
All debts, taxes, and legal obligations have been accounted for. Mrs. Holloway has made generous provisions to ensure stability for her descendants. In closing, her will stands firm. This estate is to remain a legacy for her grandchildren, protected from misuse, greed, or external claim. He closed the folder with a decisive snap. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating.
Then she erupted. This is fraud. She tricked you, all of you. She whirled on me, her voice shrill. You conniving old witch, you did this just to spite me. I met her fury with stillness. No, I said softly. I did this to protect what matters. You called me a dog.
But dogs are loyal, protective, and they remember who feeds them.
You? You barked for scraps you never earned. And now, you'll leave hungry.
Her knees buckled, and for a moment I thought she might actually collapse. She gripped the back of her chair, trembling with rage.
This isn't over, she whispered. It is, Clarkson said firmly. The law is clear. And everyone here is witness.
Dozens of eyes were on her now, some pitying, most disgusted. She had strutted into this room expecting a crown.
She walked out with nothing but shame.
When the meeting ended, relatives approached me quietly, offering hugs, words of support, apologies for ever doubting. My son lingered by the door, torn between loyalty and regret.
Mom, he began. I held up a hand. I loved you enough to leave you what matters, your children's future. But you chose her voice over mine. You'll have to live with that.
He lowered his eyes, silent. She stormed past him, her heels clattering against the floor like gunshots. Her face was pale, streaked with humiliation, her hands trembling as she shoved the door open. The corridor outside echoed with her fury as she barked at anyone who dared look at her.
And me?
I rose slowly, my body stiff but my spirit unbowed. I had endured every insult, every dismissal, every attempt to erase me. I had sat with the dogs as she ordered, but I had risen with dignity she could never touch. That night, I returned home to the porch swing my husband built. The dogs lay at my feet, their warm bodies pressing against me. The house was quiet, but it was mine again, not in possession, but in spirit. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, the evening air cool on my face. Allison's photo hung once more on the wall inside. My husband's portrait stood proudly above the mantel. The closet, the silverware, the memories, all safe, all untouchable. I had not just saved my legacy. I had saved my dignity. And I had done it not with shouting, not with fists, but with patience and truth. So if you're watching this, remember, betrayal can strip you bare, but only if you let it. Dignity, once lost, can be reclaimed. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge is not revenge at all, it's simply leaving your enemies with nothing but the echo of their own arrogance. Now subscribe, hit the bell, and tell me where you're watching from. Because maybe you've been mocked, maybe you've been cast aside, maybe someone told you to sit outside with the dogs. If they did, hold your head high. Because someday, they'll be the ones barking for scraps.